Global Partnerships Director at Impact Hub, which is a global network of impact-driven entrepreneurs operating in about 70 countries around the world, also just getting started in India. So this session will be about collaboration between corporates and startups in relation to sustainability. When you look at some of the largest and most successful companies in the world, all of them have different ways of innovating, depending on their industry, their culture. But what many of them have in common is that they look for, collaborate with, and invest in startups that bring in new ideas. They bring in the kind of entrepreneurial drive and flexibility that you need to innovate, and that is a bit difficult to make work in a large corporation. When we zoom into sustainability specifically, so when you look at the 2,000 largest companies in the world, about 60% of them have made commitments to net zero. Now, making those commitments in reality requires a ton of innovation and a ton of change. And this is again where startups come in as a source of ingenious solutions, of new technologies, sustainable materials, etc. But making that collaboration between smaller startups and much larger corporates work and add value isn't always easy, which is why we invited a panel of experts and thinkers and doers from both the corporate space and the startup space to share their experience and their wisdom with us. Now, before we go into the conversation itself, I wanted to also invite you as the audience to share your experience with us. If I can just ask for the slides to move a little bit. Thank you. So we have a little survey ready for you. You can either access it through that QR code, or if you go to slido.com, you can enter that 7-digit code so you can see it. We're going to leave it on the screen for a little bit. There are a few questions for you, and we'll take a look at your responses later in the panel and reflect on them. So thanks a lot for participating in that way. The panelists have already been introduced, so we can go to the questions directly. Just give me a second. So we'll start with a kickoff question that will be the same for all the panelists. I'm very curious, because you all represent different organizations and you have different roles. So in the context of that, what are the kind of innovation challenges in sustainability that you're currently working on? Some examples, and what kind of makes you excited about that work and what that opens, what kind of opportunities that opens? We can start with you.
Hi everyone, my name is Aditya. I am founder and CEO of Soltech Design Labs. So primarily we work into recycling different kinds of waste materials into alternate construction material applications, be construction for flooring, walling, roofing, different infrastructure products for different applications. So essentially what we are trying to solve as a challenge is on the two sides. One is of recovery of resourceful materials which is ending up in landfill, and try to divert that and maximize the use case applications from them to build urban infrastructure and landscape, which becomes a sustainable model of basically resource consumption and optimization. So we have developed a technology-driven recycling process which does different kinds of mixing of materials, plastics, construction and demolition waste, industrial waste, and we make different product applications like block, tile, brick for construction applications, wood product, alternate materials for different kinds of infrastructure, and wood and roofing applications. Now we have started integrating clean energy, which is renewable energy, into the recycled materials. So that's we have gone into building integrated photovoltaic application as well. So that's basically having a lower embodied footprint in the material itself, plus it generates a clean energy as compared to your thermal power plant. So it has lower, I would say, GHG emission per kilowatt of energy you use over a period of time. So that is the kind of innovation we are working on. So we are challenging the status quo of how waste management happens in India. and we are trying to give them a head-on with a technology-driven recycling approach as well as sustainable infrastructure-based model.
Oh, me too. Go. Yeah. Yeah. Hi. I am Anup. I represent a housing organization, so I'm going to share my views from that perspective. So we focus on housing. I mean, addressing the housing deficit worldwide, and the work is focused around addressing some of the systemic issues and helping low-income families build homes. So going to talk about sustainability from that standpoint. So if you see the housing deficit worldwide, over 1 billion people, maybe close to 2 billion people live in substandard living conditions, substandard housing. At the same time, housing is a very resource-intensive industry, right? So you need cement, you need steel, bricks, wood, and water. I mean, a lot of resources go into the construction of buildings and homes. At the same time, housing is also, not housing, construction is also a big contributor to GHG emissions. 1/3 of the world's GHG emissions are from the construction sector, actually 37%. So on one hand, you need homes. It needs a lot of resources. It is contributing quite a bit towards the GHG emissions. So that's one side of the story. And on the other side, I think if you look at housing as an asset, it is the most important asset that the family will own, right? So you save money over a period of time, and you end up building a home over a period of time. And that homes gives you status, stability, security, safety, a number of things. So this is a dual challenge, right? And if you see the climate extreme climate events, so these events affect the low-income groups more strongly, and a home is the first defense against extreme climate events. Rainfall and cyclones and things like that, extreme heat events. So it's a balancing act. So how do you make sure that while you're addressing the housing deficit and make sure that people have adequate homes to live in, which protects them from climate events, how can you do so? How can you build in a more sustainable, responsible manner? I think so that's a challenge that we face through the work. And we look at sustainability from a housing standpoint in two ways. One is climate mitigation, which is more about how can you lower the impact. So I think so a lot of work going on, and in how do you bring down the carbon footprint of the materials. How do you have better practices for building? I mean, there's a lot of work going on there. And on the other hand, there is also adaptation. So the damage has already happened. Now, how do you adapt to those damages? So these are the two areas that we work in, from a housing standpoint, and climate mitigation on one side, climate adaptation on the other side. And we do a lot of work with startups, both in both of these areas. Personally, very excited because this is something, on one hand, we are able to give people a better life through homes. And on the other hand, we are able to do so in a sustainable manner. So very exciting space.
All right. My name is Tejas. I'm from Saint-Gobain. I'm part of the corporate ventures team. So Anup talked about housing. Aditya talked about recycling plastics. The part where we're struggling with is the gap between the two. So we can put in the most sustainable sort of plasterboard in an apartment complex, but when it's torn down, who really takes the responsibility for collecting the plasterboards and being able to recycle it? That's where we're really struggling with. We're looking for technologies, we're looking for startups to try and solve this, because construction waste is a mixture of everything, sustainable, unsustainable materials. We're really looking for someone who can help us to solve those things.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ajay Menon, and I am with TechnoServe. We're a global not-for-profit in the social development and impact sector. So my team and I, we run one of the largest sustainably focused accelerator programs in India called Greener, in partnership with the IKEA Foundation and Visa Foundation. So I think the innovation challenges, I'll play it back from the perspective of the startups themselves. because all the startups that we have in our program, I think from a product and service solutioning perspective, are very strong. But I think in terms of the innovation challenges they face, starts with first raw material input that they're trying to reduce in terms of pricing, and also be able to help reduce on emissions on that side, and creating the right supply chains for a consistent supply of the right raw materials. There's also challenges in innovation in terms of access to clean and renewable energy. So for those companies where we have identified as, a large portion of their carbon emissions coming from fossil fuels, getting them access to affordable, renewable, and clean energy is a challenge, and innovation is needed there. There's also innovation in terms of the kind of financing that they need, because the early stage startups need, they're looking for anything between equity funding, debt financing, or even in the form of grants. So we're exploring and experimenting with blended finance options, as well as catalytic grants as well. There's also innovation that's required in pricing. Till a lot of these startups achieve economies of scale and they're able to reduce their raw material input, their prices for their products come at a premium, whether it's lifestyle, beauty and personal care, home care, or even green construction, green bricks. They come at a premium, and they're functionally far superior than the conventional alternative available. And I think the last challenge that they have on innovation is having access to the right approaches and tools to continuously measure, monitor their carbon emissions. That is also a real challenge, because when you look at one of the more popular methodologies of LCAs, it's incredibly expensive. And that's the kind of innovation challenges we face when working with these startups. Thanks.
Okay, so I think as Link Innovations, we have the opportunity actually to work with different corporate entities and the different innovation challenges that they're looking at. Of course, we're sector agnostic, but there is a lot of focus of sustainability within our mobility, aerospace, energy, as well as light and sustainable construction. And if I had to list down focus areas of innovations, it would be, for example, in mobility, they're really looking at materials, light and sustainable materials that can actually be used in different parts of their trucks and their cars. They're also very much looking at advanced manufacturing. And within advanced manufacturing, it could be from all the way from battery technology, how to do lesser carbon footprints of the advanced manufacturing that they're doing. Apart from that, of course, everyone's talking about EV, so they're doing all of that. But I think beyond that, some of the focus areas of sustainability are also TESS, which is thermal energy storage systems. How can that really reduce the amount of thermal output that's coming out from it? And everybody, of course, is looking at data and how can we use, say, IoT or sensor-based technology to really look at what kind of carbon footprints are coming out, what kind of emissions are coming out, and how can we reduce it. Similarly, if I have to talk about in the energy sector, they're again also looking at industrial efficiency. So within the production of these industrial products that they have, how can you reduce it? And of course, there's clean energy, clean fuels. So there is a lot of focus on all of that. And finally, again, they're also trying to look at data and how we can use AI or different data tools to really, first of all, assess and then, of course, improve the kind of imprint that sustainability has. Yeah.
Thank you. Lots of very exciting challenges and problems to solve if you like problem solving. So let's dig in a little deeper. So Ajay, I'll start with you. When in the work you do, what's the kind of role that startups or SMEs play when it comes to the sustainable transition of corporates? Can you give some examples of that?
Sure. So when we look at corporates, large corporations, I think in general, by and large, they're one of the biggest contributors to climate degradation, right? And I think there's huge opportunity for them to be able to mitigate climate impact by partnering with the right startups, to bring in the right solutions in their supply chain or in their value chain to be able to reduce their carbon emissions the world over, wherever they operate, without of course distracting themselves from the core of what their business is. So to that extent, for example, waste management is a big opportunity. There are a lot of startups in our program doing incredibly innovative things in waste management, whether it's dry or wet waste, EPR, recycling, upcycling. There are companies that have developed very high-tech sensors for large manufacturing-focused corporations to monitor water usage, wastewater management. There are lots of companies doing very innovative stuff in packaging as well, and I think sustainable packaging is one area that still needs to proliferate quite heavily in the HoReCa sector here in industry in India. So there are a lot of startups that are being able to do this, and I think being able to match up to the corporate for an opportunity to do a proof of concept, a POC or a pilot is where really the challenge is, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of these startups are still small. The large corporations are concerned whether once the pilot goes through, whether they'll have the wherewithal to be able to scale up very quickly to be able to deliver on a large order in terms of the ingredients that they're making or a solution that they're making in time and at the right price. So I've got a couple of examples that I'll share. There's one interesting company in our portfolio called Bristle. Bristle manufactures silica precipitate using rice husk ash. And it's a key ingredient that goes into the manufacturing of tires and sporting goods. We were successful in being able to connect them with Seat Tires, very large Indian conglomerate that manufactures, one of the lead players in tire manufacturing, and Decathlon, which everyone's heard of Decathlon, a sporting goods manufacturer. So it all started with us trying to help Bristle actually free up manufacturing capacity, right? Free up one entire line that they could use for experimentation with these large corporates, and also to be able to craft a much sharper positioning with these corporates to give the corporates, that level of confidence that if the POC, the pilot, were to come through, Bristle would also come through on delivering a large order. And so far it's worked out really well with Seat and with Decathlon. We've also got pilots underway with Nike, Adidas, and a couple of other large tire companies like Apollo and JK Tires. Another interesting example is a company called Plast Roots. They basically produce fuel. It's called refuse-derived fuel, RDF, using municipal solid waste. And so they've patented a technology there where basically they were selling a lot of this to the aggregators, but these were aggregators purely focused on RDF from MSW. Plast Roots have a technology that helps them diversify into looking at alternative supplies of input material for that fuel, because RDF from MSW cannot be used in the monsoon time. You can't use MSW, and a lot of these large corporations, especially the cement companies, require a steady pipeline of alternative fuels to be able to run their factories, and that's exactly what Plast Roots was able to hit upon, and we collaborated with them to unlock that value and discovery, and also then help them connect to a couple of really large cement companies in India like Ambuja and Birla as well, and in terms of their revenue now scale, they've galloped. I mean, they were doing maybe about $100,000, and they've probably grown. They will be growing about 10x this financial year. So a lot of interesting companies that way. One final example that I have actually is a company called Northeast Granules, NEG, and they basically take a lot of plastic waste and they convert it into making propylene bags for cement companies. They're trying to go one step ahead and actually produce reusable propylene bags, but they're just testing the efficacy in terms of the strength of these propylene bags, and they are 100% circular economy company, and they're already doing I would say maybe about 4 million plus in revenue, only 7 years old, but 100% circular economy, and these are the kind of innovations they're bringing to large corporations that actually need such solutions to mitigate climate change.
Sure. So I think innovation and uncovering innovation, whether it's in terms of new technology, new processes, has always been a mandate for every large corporate. And the way to traditionally go about it has been to set up these large R&D centers. But I think now they've found a more cost-effective, as well as I would say a cooler way to sometimes solve these problems, because startups really bring that in. So I think there is a certain amount of agility that startups really bring in. So, and to solve the same kind of innovations that maybe they're trying to solve with a larger R&D center. So although a lot of them have those research centers, but they're still wanting to bring startup ins. I think Tejas's program is something like that, where they have an entire research and researchers working, but want startups to really come in. And I think that's also because the startups have very deep local roots. So they understand the ecosystem, they understand the user a lot more. As large corporates, sometimes you're far away from the end users, but the startup founders really are out there understanding the problem. So they get a lot of their lived experience, their deep-rooted connection, and they start solving very niche problems, and they keep hitting at it with a hammer, which is what startups are known for. And they bring all of that local knowledge, this passion of building these products into these large corporations. And I think finally it's also because they're less bureaucratic when I'm a startup, they have more kind of autonomy. So they're able to move faster, quicker, pivot quickly, and bring that kind of agility into these large corporations also. If I had to give you examples, I think, for example, a company that we work with in mobility is really looking at their large trucks, and they're looking within that there is a lot of heat dissipated, energy dissipation in their large trucks. So how do you actually utilize it and optimize it and reuse this kind of energy which is generated? And we had one startup called ITES, which has a thermal energy storage system, which allows them to actually, when the trucks are moving, how does that system fit in, try to capture this energy, and they have a very advanced phase change system. So they use that to actually capture this and reutilize it. Along with Saint-Gobain and the program that Tejas is heading now, we had a very interesting startup which is looking at agri-waste, but creating a kind of coatings from this agri-waste called Altem is the name of the startup. And they're using these coatings to actually put on different products that they have, which makes these different panels resistant to mold, water resistant. So all of that really sort of brings in newer technology, which is much faster, I think, within the corporate world from the startups. Yeah.
So Tejas actually work inside a corporate, and very curious to the your experience. So when you take a look at one of the innovation challenges you're working on, why did you choose to take the route of working with startups as compared to some of the other options you may have had? What are innovation routes?
Sure. So as Meher mentioned, we partner with Link Innovation for our startup scouting program. So I was going to cover exactly what Meher was, so she stole all my points. But nonetheless, we've tried other options as well. What we found through experience is that research in-house tends to get siloed and very sort of focus-driven, and they sort of start losing sight of what's happening outside in the real world. Right? Exactly the startup that Meher talked about, Altem, we would have sort of looked at this eventually maybe in like 10 years, 15 years probably. But the kind of scale that we bring combined with the speed and agility that a startup brings, that's what really creates the magic. Right? So they say that too many cooks spoil the broth, but if you invite enough of the right kind of cooks, you create a feast. Right? You create a portfolio of products that you can then offer, which is really what Saint-Gobain does, right? So we either go out and acquire a company, or the other way for us is to innovate in-house. So yeah, that being said, so we run these cohorts once a year with Link as our partner, where we throw out challenge statements and we invite startups to come and solve them. But we also have an ongoing engagement with startups. We don't wait for the cohort to start to engage with the startup. It is a great startup. We invite them to have a chat with our business, take it up directly and accelerate it and see how we can take it to market together.
So, yeah, what, like, when that collaboration is successful, the startup needs to be ready, but also the corporate needs to be ready. What advice would you give both the startups, in terms of being ready for that, and to your peers in other large companies, with your experience?
So I'll start with the other corporates. I think there's a need for patient capital. There's a lot of talk about patient capital, but more needs to happen in terms of investing and staying invested in these new and emerging technologies, and not just for 3 years, but 5, 7, 10 years. seeing them through to completion. With startups, the trend that I see is uh, possibly because of the abundance of grants, there's plenty of early stage startups and a lot of successful late stage startups. But there's a gap in between these two, precisely around Series A, pre-Series A stage where startups struggle with funding, right? So I would say startups should focus more on trying to cross that bridge and make sort of connections with whoever, not just corporates, but anyone else who can get them through that sort of valley of death.
I mean, let's take a look at what's going on in the housing and construction space. So, as Habitat Humanity and the Toronto Center for Innovation and Shelter do a lot of work with different shelter tech startups. They're also running a construction innovation on the brings together also other types of stakeholders. What are some of the lessons learned that you're taking from the work you're doing from facilitating that kind of collaboration? What is working well, what's not working so well?
Yeah, so Shelter Tech is short for Shelter Technologies, and primarily we look at and support technologies that are relevant for low-income housing. I mean, low-income housing in specific, but for housing and construction sector in general. So that is what we do, and the program that we're doing with the Kerala Startup Mission, which is the Construction Innovation Hub, or the CIH, is meant to be a platform to bring startups on one side, investors, industry stakeholders, a number of people come together to support the startups throughout their life cycle. So that's what we're doing with Kerala Startup Mission through the CIH. The Shelter Tech program, and we look at a number of domains in housing, so there is core housing, which includes the roof, the walls, the foundation, there is water and energy, which is, support services that are needed to keep the house running. Land is another area that we look at. Finance, housing finance is yet another area. So a number of related areas towards housing, around housing. When we work with startups through Shelter Tech, so there are two formats in which we work. One is the hard support, and the other one is the soft support. When I say hard support, it's primarily acceleration. It's a very fixed duration, very structured program. Either we run our own accelerators or we partner with other accelerators to provide, that acceleration incubation support to the startups. So that's one type of support that we provide. We also invest. We have our own venture fund. It's called the Shelter Venture Fund, and through the venture fund we make investments. So that's hard support. So we have supported about 120 startups worldwide across many geographies. 11 investments made through the Shelter Venture Fund. So that's one type of support. The other type of support that we provide to startups is soft support. And when I say soft support, what I mean is mentorship, connections, recognitions, awards, that kind of stuff, which it's available, and people can use it, startups can use it in a number of ways. But I think, that's the soft touch, that will help you in your journey. And what we have found through our work is that, neither of these models, we actually found out that a hybrid model is the most effective model. So we have something called a catalytic grant program. So what we do is we run challenges, we select startups, and these startups then submit a specific proposal to us on the area, basically seeking support on the area that they need support on. So it could be for further developing their product, validating the product in the market. It could be for green certifications. It could be for a number of things, right? But they come to us with a very specific ask. And a project is then designed around that ask, and structured support. It's not structured support, it's customized support that is put together around that ask. And that is something, that we find, it is working very well. It is working very well for us because, we are able to give that dedicated attention to the startup. And for the startup, it's very useful because they see it very valuable because it is highly custom made for them. So, yeah, that's what we're seeing, yeah.
Yeah, the support is essential, and I think you see the same. And so when you look at some of the successful collaborations between some of the startups you're working corporate partners, what's the value? How do the corporates benefit and from that collaboration, and also what role does those kinds of collaborations play in the trajectory of the startup?
Right. So when we, even though we are a NGO, we are a non-governmental organization, a housing-focused organization, it's a non-profit, we can also be looked at as a corporate. So I think, and I'm going to share two perspectives. One is Habitat as a corporate or an institution supporting startups. And when we provide support to startups, we also work with a number of corporates. I mean, not just corporates, a number of other stakeholders who come together to support the startups. And what we have seen is, we've seen three different things. One is the startup, there is strategic alignment with respect to between the startup and the corporate that is supporting the startup, right? So which means the product or the service from the startup makes business sense to the corporation. It helps with business transformation. Maybe it leads to a new line of business, that can go to the market. So I think, that's one type of support, one type of alignment. And that is very useful, very critical, because that would then lead to the corporate looking at the startup very closely for funding, strategic partnerships, so that's one type of support. See, the second type of support that we see is more on the softer side, which is more about CSR funding made available to startups, mentorship. Mentorship again, I mean, we have done all types of mentorship programs. So we have very structured mentorship programs. For example, with Dow, there is a product mentorship program. So startups that, startups that are interesting to Dow, they get technical mentorship from Dow. So very focused product development expertise. I mean, we also do very broad-based mentorship program where, these people are subject matter. I mean, they're not affiliated to an organization, but, they're very deep industry experience and they come and support the startup. So I think, that's a soft engagement, that one can have with a corporate. Or, I mean, when I say corporate, I mean any institution or enterprise. And the third one is, the startup fits into the value chain of the business. So it could be either on the supply side or on the demand side. And then, the startup, so this is purely a partnership business opportunity for the startup. So the startup then gets, so we try and facilitate, these three different types of support when we work with corporates and other enterprises. So one is the strategic alignment, which perhaps could lead to an acquisition or funding. The second one is more business partnership, which leads to more business opportunities for the startup. And the third one is more soft support. So I think, that's what we have found, yeah.
Alicia, you're an actual entrepreneur. You're actually working with corporates as an entrepreneur. At least in my experience, it's not always easy to set up those kinds of collaborations, and it's maybe more difficult to actually reach their potential. And so I'm wondering, from your experience, is it worth the time because it takes a lot of effort? And what would you recommend? What in your experience makes those kinds of collaborations valuable?
So I will answer it into two questions separately. So one part is where I will give you an actual story about how we got supported. So Habitat for Humanity, the Dow's mentorship program, we are one of the startup who got that mentorship. So we got our product tested in Dow. We developed different kinds of coatings and paints for different kinds of emulsion for flooring and all. So which have higher solar reflective index, which can be used for corporate, for their own infrastructure building, their own warehouses and everything. So that we did initially. We did another trial with Dow where Dow was operating a CSR project in Mumbai for collecting marine litter plastics to another organization, and then they wanted to do something end of life as a circularity. So they sent this material to our facility. We brought Dow India sustainability lead, the NGO founder Afroz Shah, everybody to our facility. We processed that material, made into products, and those products are installed in Mumbai. So these are the kind of partnerships which we initiated through Habitat for Humanity, because they specifically took us as a product focus, and then they put in touch with the right corporate. That is one. Second thing, so we are part of Green Hour program as well. So we recently got our environmental impact assessment done. So last year we saved around 44,800 kg CO2 equivalent of greenhouse gas emission, and net, which is scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, which is not possible for a startup company. We did that also, and with a reputed organization like JPAL under this program, we didn't have to pay anything. We just had to give them the numbers and data which were actually working. So that was also coming to 22,000 kg net, which is negative. We have offset. So that is the kind of thing which we get support, and now these things help us to get into the corporate. Now when I go to corporates like Mahindra Logistics, who are building their net zero warehouses, so the first question they ask is, give us your product certifications, what are your like embodied energy and all other things, whether your products are green, do you have credible certification and all. So these certifications definitely help in that, and we do get supported from different organizations like Willgrow supported us to get this LCA, EPD, Indian Green Building Council, Green Pro certification in place, environmental impact assessment done, then coating development, all those things. So when there's multiple organizations who are helping us tiny bits and pieces, and we combine it together to frame a project and pitch it to corporate, it makes perfect sense for them, because now they have a credible solution with a data back number and qualitative analysis. So that is one. I will give you, apart from Dow, we are right now undergoing planning a pilot with Mahindra Logistics for net zero warehouses, where we are trying to bring them this lower embodied carbon materials to build their warehouses in flooring, walling and roofing categories, and any other material categories we can. From Dow pilot, we went on to, Dow suggested us to Tetra Pak, so Tetra Pak reached out to us. So now we are doing a pilot with Tetra Pak. One of the catalytic grant which we received from Sheltertech was in COVID, and we did a very interesting project in that we use PPE kits, old PPE kits, which is like after use, we process that into a building material application and tested it out, like whether there is a toxicity, whether there is a virus, and like all other norms as per the standards. And we were successfully able to convert a biomedical grade plastic. I'm not saying that there are different grades in biomedical. I'm not endorsing that, but there are certain grades where there is no transfusion or blood, or there is link, that can very well be used to process into material applications. That we did with this catalytic grant, and we published a full report on that through Habitat for Humanity. And that was the one which helped us to crack this Tetra Pak, where we are actually solving the similar problem to them. Is they have a plastic waste coming out of their pulpers and meals, and they want to do end of life circularity. They have right now waste to incineration facility to take care of that, but they want to go more sustainable around it, and they want to increase their decrease their carbon footprint overall. So we are helping them to do that. So we are right now taking 2 pilots with them in separate basis. Another pilot we cracked was with JSW. So in JSW, what we essentially did is they had a call for proposal specifically for plastic waste recycling. We applied that, and since we had worked with different range of materials, we understood that they have a steel as a focus. So steel slag is one of the biggest byproduct waste coming out of their factories, and there is a huge ample amount of applications in road and construction, but there are certain component of slag waste which does not yield up for any performance, or let's say any kind of performance property, so it cannot be used. That kind of filler materials we use in our product to make products. So we basically pitch them that apart from plastic waste for which we have applied, we can help you with solve this also. And they went on to say that let us set up 2 pilot projects. So they gave us funding, which is right now going on, 2 pilot projects in 2 of their facilities in Vijayanagar and Dolvi Steelworks. So these are the kind of corporate partnerships we are able to work out. And I think the best part is that I will say the second question, which is difficult, how it is difficult to work is, see, if you do not have certifications, credible certifications, it is extremely difficult to work with a corporate, because they cannot take you on your face value. And for startup like us, we are always, let's say, on cash crunch, or very, I would say, we do not have that kind of money flowing in for certifications and do different kinds of national, international level things. So then we rely on the programs and partners who help us to do this in, let's say, either in cost feasible manner or let's say free of cost with some of the funders. So that is one good thing. Second thing is corporates generally have a time period to take anything in board. Like you pitch it today, it cannot work in, whether they have a diring need also, it depends on that all, but they cannot take it and do it in within a month. So it takes time, like over a period of 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, it will fruitfully yield into something, or it may not. It depends on the their expectation versus your delivery as well. So that is something which we have to match. Many times as a startup we deliver above than our expectation, but still it lacks the threshold which the corporates have made. So we will not go ahead after the pilot. That also happens, and that's a reality. But yeah, it's difficult to work with them, but it's but we focus on working with them because that is the thing which can help us scale faster and which can help us to leverage market very faster. Because if I am solving something for Saint-Gobain, if I am solving something for JSW, if I am solving something for Unilever, that is something I can pitch in market and say that this is I am doing for them, I can do it for you. So then the brand value, the association, everything we can leverage, which we cannot get from any other sources. Money cannot bring those things, right? Digital marketing, everything cannot bring that, the kind of case study you make after working with them. That is.
The learning from different aspects, different angles of this work. Let's think a little bit about, let's take a look at what you have shared from the audience as your experience. If we can have the results of that survey, please, on the screen. So we ask you 3 questions. Here we go. Great. So the first question was, what role do you think startups play in the sustainable digital corporation? So we have 77% of those of you who responded say it's essential. So 50% it's nice to have, and 8% have you thought about it? So nobody thinks it's just a distraction. Great. Let's take a look at the next question. Scroll down a bit. Can you scroll down on the next one? Here we go. It looks like we had a bit of a second. Did you answer any other questions to answer? Just one. Okay, and we had a bit of a bug. Anyway, so let's only hear from the audience. Maybe there's a good level of agreement with how important this is. We also had other questions for you in terms of what your experience was and what do you think would be helpful. So unfortunately, those didn't get through somehow. But no, we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. If so many of you think it's essential, I'm sure there's going to be a few questions in your minds.
Mr. Nambia, this question is for you, sir. With the the housing projects that you do you also associate with other organizations like Rotary or similar?
Yeah, so we do, I think, just to explain the organization a little bit. So there are 2 parts to Habitat. So one is, I belong to the international group, And I'm part of the Innovation Center, which is called the Terwilliger Center for Innovation. And the approach that we take is slightly different. So we work with startups and other corporates that have a role in the supply chain. That's the type of work that we do. We also have a trust in India, and they do a lot of community engagement and home building and things like that. And as part of that, they work with a number of local NGOs. So that's an area where we work with organizations like Rotary and other local NGOs. Yeah.
Great, no, sir. Just following up on that,
Yeah.
because I'm a Rotarian myself, and like
Okay.
in Cochin, in the city alone, there are 45, 50 clubs.
Yeah.
And most of us, like even my own club, did around 7 to 10 homes in the last 2-3 years.
Okay.
A lot of delays happen because every home is different. So with your, maybe we can speak later, the tech can surely help. What I believe in is that duplication and the technology can fasten the process and probably bring down the cost, which will eventually will be the best option for all stakeholders in this. So
Yeah. Yeah, we can catch up. Yeah. Thanks.
So I can share two stories particularly around Soltech. One is around very early stage where we were in 2019 approximately, and we were trying to ramp up what we are doing in lab to a MVP model to do it on, let's say, industrial scale, but I would say pilot industrial scale. So we had some facility where we were working out and trying different things, and that is where we got approached from one of the companies. It's a listed company, and they were working into machine manufacturing around the same thing. And we thought that they can be a strategic people, that wherever we have to set up this facility of manufacturing and technology to take materials, recycle them into products, this technology making headache will be gone by our head, and we will be more of a kind of thinkers and doers and enablers rather than machine manufacturers like that. So that is where we basically said yes to one of the company, and we started working on investment raising from their side. And it was just around the COVID, like around 2020, and that didn't go well because COVID was there, so there was a huge crunch in the market about the cash capital going in. They being listed company, they had multiple subsidiaries. It was very difficult for them also to mobilize, but they had to run 6-7 companies. I had to run one. So I had to figure out how to run Soltech. And they were figuring out well for themselves, but I was not. And all the capital we had was dried up, and I had around 13 people team. Everyone has to leave because I was not able to pay certain. Me and my co-founder, who is also my cousin brother, so he doesn't have any choice to go anywhere, so he was left alone with me. And so we both were stuck, and it was like, I would say, a dead kind of thing situation for 7 months almost. Yeah, 6 to 7 months there was no operation. No means no operation. Our assets were logged, nothing was happening. Manufacturing issues were there because of the restrictions of COVID. We didn't have money, and the primary failure of that alignment, like the partnership, was the misalignment in the vision. So what happens is they are a kind of machine manufacturing company. They visualize the business model of selling machines and taking profit out of it. We visualize the business model of end application. So we make money from the end application. So we enable people to set up this facility, recycling facility, and we will make money out of the end products goes into market. We create brand around it. We create a sustainable building material brand around it, something like that sort. So this primary misalignment, which which we thought that we can make them convince, and they thought they can make us do according to their thing, and we both were adamant on each of our thing, and I think fortunately when for both of us it was good that we disassociated. It didn't go well, and we had a failure. Almost 7 months we were not doing nothing, so we were dead in the waters, and then after that we personally took some loans from some people, pushed that into company, and then started manufacturing and working again. Now we have repaid everything. We are zero debt company and 100% bootstrap. So that is something which we achieved from that one partnership. Around last year also we did got one collaboration from a big corporate, I would say, and they come in top 10 corporates in India with a market cap size. And one of their division was having a problem with certain kinds of waste materials, and they had an open for call, and we were one of them who supplied solution to them, and then we can do it. The meeting happens, the presentation happens. Out of 200 plus companies who provided the solution, we were selected as a solution implementer. But then somewhere around that, few of their different team member from a different vertical of their team came in between and tried to get a deal, a Sharky offer deal, which we were not able to commit because we were not sure what is the business opportunity. Like the brand value definitely was there, but we were not sure what the business opportunity is they are going to give. And that didn't go well. They were also not even negotiating on the terms. So these are the two things which happened for Soltech. But yeah, seeing on both the things, one is I understood while talking to investors, whether it is strategic or capital based, I understood what questions to ask in order to assess even investor whether they are aligning with us or not, or whether they believe in our model or not. If they are not believing, even if they have capital, it's of no use to me technically, because once they put in capital and they want the company to work their way, then that's something which cannot work, because I won't believe in that model. And essentially me and my co-founder, who was founding team members, we have to believe in the model to scale apart from the capital. That's the very prime essential thing. And on the corporate side, yes, after that we forged partnership with other corporates. Hopefully not everyone are alike, like as human also, in corporates also. So we are doing good with other corporates, yeah.
Sure. I think I'd like to add to what Aditya said. So we've also analyzed the failure modes when we look at partnerships with startups. So one thing that tends to happen is taking the vendor approach. So it's very easy. It's sort of a low-hanging fruit when you identify a startup and you say that we want this, we pay you this, you give us this, and it ends there, right? So really the no-win approach to engaging with startups. So we're trying at Saint-Gobain we're very hard to move away from the vendorization model and move towards a more partners in progress sort of model, right? And the second is scaling up. So what might seem fantastic at a lab scale is really almost impossible to scale to commercial levels. So two failure modes that we've seen in the past. I think a good evaluation early on would help to avoid the scaling up problem. And the vendorization is just a mindset shift. It has to happen at an organizational level.
Yeah, so I mean, I want to talk about failures from both sides, just like they just did. Like, I sometimes feel that access to market and access to capital is not an issue for a corporate, but it becomes very essential to identify a product owner or a business owner internally who's going to support that startup. So one of the failures we've seen is that the champion of that use case, which was working very closely with that startup, leaves that organization, and all the work that has been put in then falls apart. So finding champions internally who are as passionate about innovation and startups and retaining them in organizations so that there is not a break in that entire innovation journey is one of the things. Before you ask me what did we learn from that, I think always having two people on it. So, sometimes we're just putting in all our eggs in one basket with just one team. So having more than one person champion it is one of the things that we've tried. Also trying to get different teams involved with it, and not just one team. So you have product, you have business, you have, finance, you have all of the different teams involved. So then there are still at least some support in case one or two people leave. That's one. And I think corporates always say that to me, I think, and that's true for startups. They've been, also trained to do that, is sometimes they overpromise. Right? Because the hustle mode is something that is, inherent to it, which is critical for their survival and growth. But a lot of the corporates do come back and say that the promise that the startup made, that they would be able to fulfill, the readiness of the product, the capability of them to produce at scale, was very far off from what they promised us at the beginning. Our learning from that is, do a lot more due diligence ourselves. One is the startup pitching and then wanting to become part of this, but a back-end diligence that our organization does to really understand if the startup is what it is, promising to be. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, more than failure and what we've learned from it, I think from our program perspective, the big challenge is on expectation setting. The minute they are part of a cohort in the Accelerator program, I think 9 out of 10 companies will say, show me the money and, show me an introduction to a large corporation to get some business going. And that becomes challenging in terms of expectation setting, because a lot of these introductions and opportunities to pitch, whether it's for investment or even in terms of a corporate partnership, are hard to come by, and you don't want to be burning those bridges in the early stages. So we do take some time, but it's a bit of a challenge where our business advisors have got to temper the enthusiasm of the founders to say that it will come in time, and we've got enough case studies to prove that it will happen, and showing them the schedule in terms of there is a roadshow coming up, whether for investors or for corporate demos, but you're going to have to be ready for that.
No, surprisingly, I think, most of the companies that we support with through the Catalytic Grant has been a success. We have a very rigorous due diligence process, and the scope of the project pilot is also very, very tight, so very limited chances for failure. But some of the things we have seen, one is sometimes there is a mission drift. We think the startup can serve low-income housing, and then through the pilot we find out that, look, that is not going to happen. So that is one type of failure. The project is successful, but it is not relevant for us. So I think, that is one type of failure. The other one that we have found, especially when we work with other corporates, is on the IP. So when we refer our startups to corporates, and we think there is value for the startup to work with the corporate, the startups are not that excited, because they're hesitant to share their secrets. So there is always that. So one of the mentorship programs, only 3 out of 5 were successful. 2 did not wholeheartedly participate in the mentorship program because they thought by working with them, we will give away the IP. So that is another sort of failure. But that said, we are a NGO, so for us, we love failures because it's a great case study. So, yeah.
Great source of learning. Thank you so much. We have time for one more question, or one question from the audience. So if there's any people that you want for you design. Or if any of the panelists have an additional question to ask one another, there's also an opportunity.
I was just thinking about the survey, and 8% I think said, I did not think about it. Maybe they should think, because all of these partnerships are useful in some way. So I think it's good to have the conversation, figure out what works, what might work, and make that connection. Yeah.
Because I think that is my experience. Even the process of pitching to a corporate and getting to that selection process generates a lot of lessons learned. So,
Yeah, just to add to what Anup was saying, I think whenever I meet a startup and talk about corporate innovation, they're always thinking just like they just said, it's a vendor kind of mindset. The startup's also looking at, okay, maybe I can go and sell to this corporate, Rather than actually, I would like all startups in the room to think that they can become partners with this corporate and not always see them as, okay, can this corporate actually buy or become a channel of revenue? And that could be a lot more strategically useful, like how everybody's been talking in terms of credibility, in terms of brand building, all of that is really helpful. Yeah.
I will just add from the startups side is that definitely agree to that point, but it takes time to learn that. The reason is that most of the startups started or getting started in India, either they are, let's say, some employee or some college pass or student, or myself started from straight out of the college. So we don't have that kind of understanding of the market, right? From our perspective, what we are trying to solve is two things: customer and revenue, that is one part of thing; investment and scale, that's the second part of thing. Other than two things, we are very difficult in our time zones to think about anything. Product development is a parallel thing. It has to go for the sales, so that is for sure. So that is where it is, I would say, you guys should give a leeway to startup. If they are not understanding, you should make better programs to make them give a capacity kind of approach to help them, like you guys are already doing. I know about Link Innovations, how they work. So that is where the actual, I would say, the real problem solving happens, where there is a innovation, but the innovator is not in a mindset to work with a corporate. But if you can mold that innovator to work with corporate, that you should not work with a vendor relationship, you should work with a partnership. And this might not, let's say, be a product focus, but a solution focusing. If you solve this challenge for this corporate, imagine other corporates knocking up your door. So if that kind of like exposure you give to that innovator or founder, I think nobody will try to back off from that, because everybody at the end of the day want to be winner, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In my experience, if possible, it's also helpful to have someone on the team who actually worked for a corporate before, because you kind of understand a little bit like what's going on inside in terms of decision making and internal politics or whatever it may be. Great. I think our time is up. So thank you all for joining. I'm just gonna slip in a little advertisement for tomorrow. We'll be launching a new initiative that is in partnership with Habitat for Humanity, the Toronto Center for Innovation, Children, and Impact Hub, called the Open House Alliance. It will be exactly about this. It's going to drive collaboration between corporates and startups, especially in relation to sustainable and affordable housing. And India is one of the key markets for the initiative, but it is a truly global program, so we're going to be engaging corporates and startups anywhere around the world. So yeah, join us tomorrow. It is at 11:40 on the main stage, right? So mark that down. But thank you so much to all the panelists. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks.